Going with the Eagles to start here.
Well, what was your, just general assessment of the game Sunday?
Yeah, I think from an offensive standpoint, we definitely need to do a better job coaching these guys up, players playing better, and really holding up our end of the bargain with our defense playing so well, our special teams playing well. And so we had a great week of practice, really moving forward with that mindset of how can we improve, how can we grow in all facets, and be that offense that's playing complementary football for our team.
The numbers as they were, Shane, why so many passes?
Really in the second half, it got to that point where we were starting to throw it, and then in the first half, it's something that's happened a few times this year where we're again looking to fix it and get that balance going. But I'm always going to keep coming back to avoiding those negative plays, doing a better job on third down so that we can get those runs going. And I need to do a great job of sticking in the run game in those early game situations here where we can come out with that balance, especially in that first half of the game there.
So even in the second half, what happened then?
Similar thing there, come out in the run, and then we have the jet sweep that we give up a negative play on right there on that, and kind of get out of whack. And so that's really going to keep being the main focus is eliminating those negative plays so that we don't get stuck in those second and longs, third down situations, and we can keep on track and have those play actions and runs and keepers in the marriage that we know we want to have them at.
How much was the playbook impacted as far as not having under center plays? How much did that impact what you guys can do?
Yeah, I think those guys did a great job. Russ did a great job, and the running backs and the centers of really maintaining our offensive system. Utilizing a couple different things throughout the game, but I don't think it had much of an effect on our offense at all.
Did you, in terms of just Russell's passing or anything? Did you think hit his finger or anything had anything to do with any of that? Or?
No, I think like anything else, coming back and being out from practice, and I think he had a great week this week where the importance of being out there and throwing it, and did a great job. Had a great day today, especially in our third down area there. So just looking for him to keep getting better, like everyone, like we're all trying to do every week in practice, and I thought it really showed up this week where he's throwing the ball really well.
Talk about showing up, that Arizona pass rush shows up big time. You've seen this in a couple of different ways. What is it that stands out, and why year after year are they so good at that?
Yeah, I think it starts with their edge rushers and their ability to affect the passer and collapse the pocket, and then they get the good interior push, and obviously with Chandler Jones, but the rest of the guys doing such a good job on the edge that anything that gets out of rhythm or gets the quarterback off the spot, those guys have a tendency to get home pretty quickly. And then on third down, like a lot of teams we've seen this year, they have a great blitz package, a great mixture of different exotic fronts that they're able to get to the quarterback and affect the quarterback in different ways. So it'll be another week of being great communicators, being great with our eyes up front and seeing what's going on pre-snap, being able to find kind of where those guys are located, and then protecting. And then the receivers doing a great job of getting open in the rhythm of the plays, because like every week those sacks a lot of times are tied into the back end and vice versa. So when a defense is playing well like these guys are playing, the front end's getting home in a good timely fashion, and the secondary is trusting that they're getting home in the timing of their defensive call so that they can stay aggressive in their coverage.
That pass rush has been really good for several years. They've had good maintenance in the back half, but they've been mid-level, a lot of the league is strong defense. What do you think is the biggest area they've grown to now being top 5 defenses?
Yeah, I think those pass rush scenarios are creating a lot of turnovers for those guys right now, and creating those turnovers like we're working on offense, of not turning the ball over, doing a great job of being successful as far as protecting the ball every week. Once that pass rush starts getting home, and it's not just sacks, but it's also whether it's a strip sack, fumble, or creating an interception off of the pressure where the ball's up in the air, and that's where they're tying it in together this year.
Unlike run pass numbers, is that something you're really cognizant of during the game? Do you write down how many runs and passes we've had, or just kind of look at the stats?
Yeah. We keep track of it throughout the game and keep a good feel for it. And then sometimes within the flow of drives, that's where you look back and there's some certain areas where could have done a better job of keeping that balance up a little bit more when you look back at it. But definitely something we're aware of, and far as whether it's the P and 10s or the within the drive, kind of what our balance is looking like, and again trying to keep striving for that better balance in our offensive system.
What are some of the things you look at to where you see
you feel like you have confidence that it's going to make a turn for you, whether it's the third down numbers, some of the areas you've struggled. What kind of signs are you seeing that make you think that you're beating on the door of that turning for you?
I think it's been a year for us on offense where we felt so close so many times to really putting that full 4 quarters together. Obviously, coming out of this past week, we need to do a better job of putting points on the board, and that's the bottom line. But the way that the players are competing at practice, the way they're still looking to improve, the way they're engaged in the meetings, that's what tells me, hey, these guys know we're right on the cusp of this thing. So no one's given in to any of the ups and downs of the season so far, and everyone's just making those weekly improvements. And like I said, today's one of our best days we've had all year out there throwing the ball and playing good football in all the phases that we worked on today.
Last year against Arizona, DK had one of the most memorable highlights when he chased down Judah Baker.
Unbelievable.
You saw that as an opponent. What was your reaction to that play?
I mean, at that point, you're just a fan watching 2 guys competing. Baker made an unbelievable play on the interception, and then talk about the effort and the stuff that's shown out here on the practice field. DK really exemplified it on that play and showed his speed and showed his really toughness and resiliency to not let the play be over and run however many yards. And when you're on the other side of that, that's a highlight up in the week where you're just saying, wow, that was an impressive deal right there.
How do you get more out of the screen game on offense?
I think really the timing there, some of the timing and rhythm, and we've kept on working those things there. And the one thing we have noticed that defenses have done an excellent job around the league, with working their perimeter screen defenses and the way the guys are running out of the stacks and defending those things. So, I think, we're never really chasing the screen game necessarily, but there are some scenarios here. We tried to get the trick play screen off this past week, and obviously Green Bay did a great job of staying right at home and not taking the cheese on that. But, each week we'll have our little variety of screen games, and a lot of that, it's so dependent on how the rush plays out, how those things play out, but something we're aware of and looking to improve with.
What are you learning, or have you learned as a first-time play caller?
Just maintaining that balance. There's going to be ups and downs, and I think DK said it best the other day. We just want to win, and that's the goal here. That's the goal every week, and understanding that, hey, there's some things that have gone in a different direction than I want them to go, that we want them to go as an offense right here, but really staying balanced and understanding that, hey, we have a lot of trust in the guys in this building. Everyone's believing in themselves. Everyone's believing in our offense, and it's still at a high level when you see these guys working out here and really understanding that. And keeping everything moving in that balanced, positive direction.
Third down struggles against the Packers, some of the same stuff you saw in the first half of the season, or were they for different reasons on Sunday?
I think some similar things, but the difference is the first one where we're inches away from Russ using his legs right there when if teams are going to play some of those man match defenses right there, and Russ does a great job, just like the very first third down we converted of the year against the Colts, where he found that rush lane and got up there and thought he had the first down, didn't quite get it, but getting off track a little bit on those first half first downs where we go 1 for 5 again kind of leads back into what our theme has been and what we're continuing to do to get better. But it's just about handling the rush. It's about communicating with what the blitz packages that we're seeing, and then receivers doing a great job getting open in the timing and rhythm of the plays.
You said you've learned about staying balanced. You mean balanced, even-keeled?
Yeah, even keeled. Yep. Separate from the there's the offensive balance, but also being balanced here, knowing that, hey, we're coming into that positive mindset every single week, and once we really get into that Wednesday meeting, and usually it's before that, we flush that out, we're on to the next week, and feeling that, like we talked about, the practice, the effort, how guys are flying around on the field here, tells me that everyone's mind's cleared and we're ready to move on to that next opponent and ready to get to work.
There have been times this year you didn't feel you were even keeled about anything in particular?
No, but it's something, I think to present, hey, as your emotions go up and down throughout the course of a game, or coming in on Monday, coming on Tuesday, just that good reminder to myself, because I do want to always have that even keel mindset. Hey, stay the course here, trust the process, trust trust in yourself, trust everyone around you, and the positive results will come.
It seems like Tyler either explodes on offense or is pretty quiet. What do you attribute that to?
Yeah, I think like this past week, I think everyone would like to get the ball a little bit more, completing some more passes. I think he did a great job 2 weeks ago winning some of those matchups, and then like every week, just depending on how the coverages play out, we'll keep continuing to do a great job of trying to get those guys the ball in our playmakers' hands, whether it's DK, whether it's Tyler, whether it's Freddie. You got Gerald, Will Dissly. We got a lot of different guys, and just keep doing a good job of I think the more efficient we are on offense and the better we're playing, the more the ball's naturally finding those guys, and those games do happen. So I think just as an offense as a whole, the better we play, the more those guys shine.
Shane, Russell's completing just 40% of his passes on third down so far this year. Why do you think that's been such a tough down for him and you guys as an offense to get your successes on?
I just think defenses have done a great job of staying in tight coverage, getting home with some pass rushes, and I think just for us to keep continuing to work and understand and getting like we said, getting open on the timing and the rhythm of the play, working in our communication on some of those protections when we're seeing those exotic blitzes, and knowing that it's rare for quarterbacks to really be at their if you're a 70% passer, you're not necessarily going to be a 70% third down passer, but finding those completions, finding some in certain times, some of the underneath check downs that might have a chance maybe not to convert, but if you break a tackle, they do. So I just think continuing to work and putting together full, complete third down days is something we're striving to do, and we're just not quite there yet as an offense.
When you're looking at third down numbers beyond just excluding short yardage, where do you start with, like third and 4? Is that what you guys consider like not?
I don't want necessarily. I always listen to the other guys tell me when they're starting their break, so I can't necessarily give away the the self-scout world right there. But I know you can understand that. But yeah, we have it broken out into certain sections on third down where we got what we feel like is our group of plays that are going to work in this section of yards, in this section, and then in the long yardage situation. So yeah, still focusing on that, but I'll leave that as a gray area for those guys to keep guessing on.
Has there been a game this year, Shane, that you've gone according to plan and you've done everything in the game plan you wanted to do?
I don't know how many games there are that are like that in football world. It's a game where there's always adjustments that happens. There's always things that play out one way, or I always go back even like in the San Francisco game when we caught a little fire there in the second half, and one of the plays where you feel great about the play call, works out totally different, but the quarterback makes a miraculous play, rolls out to his right, throws a touchdown to Freddie. So I think it's a combination of putting our guys in the great positions with the calls, and then those certain moments where the guys make plays, whether it's off schedule or just a little bit out of the framework. To me, those are always the best games where some stuff comes to life that you've worked on, and then the players, because it's still a player's game, they make things come to life off schedule or out of the rhythm of the play, and put those highlight type things together. All right, thank you guys.
Thank you.